Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. There's a number of key themes, actually, that have been covered already, both by my colleague Michelle and also Amanda from Manchester. So I'll try not to dwell on those again. But I was really going to talk a little bit about maximising rail capacity in London. Everything you see there is the things that I'm currently responsible for. So the DLR, the Underground, the London Overground, the trams, and the fantastic cable car, which is apparently a railway too. That is the day job. That's the tube map. That's all the bits that we're responsible for. Rail in London does, as Michelle implied, have a national importance, because if you just look at those stats, I'm not going to read them out, but you can see that, you know, if 62% of UK rail journeys start or finish in London, then the economics of railways in London is disproportionately important than perhaps it is across the rest of the country. Basic things you've got to do in life. One is to sort of run the place a bit more reliably. That's the way that we describe it on the Underground perspective, something called annual lost customer hours. It's a bit of a complex formula. It evolved from the old balkanized days of the public-private partnership, but we've kept it going because it's a common currency that talks about what we need to do. And we hit the Mayor's target early to reduce by a further 30% in this mayoral term. I only do 4 things, actually. I just have to run a reliable and safe railway every day. Because if I don't, then I can't even get into a conference such as this, because you all want to tell me about your delay on the DLR or on the Bakerloo line. I've got to expand the capacity from the current network, recognising the reality that deep single-bore Victorian tube tunnels are by definition too narrow and too deep. So how do you get the maximum capacity from that ancient infrastructure? How, therefore, do you compensate for that? By growing the network still further. That's part of things like Crossrail 2, Crossrail 1, certainly, and also the Battersea extension of the Northern Line, the Metropolitan Line extension up to Watford Junction, and also taking over increasingly responsibility for the national rail network in London. And then something I rather grandly call transforming customer service. That's just about ensuring that we treat our passengers in a decent, human, modern, consistent way that recognises there are people who pay a lot of money for our services and they kind of deserve to be treated respectfully by us. You've got to underpin all of that by being more efficient, as every business has, by using people. I actually happen to believe people and railways go well together. Makes sense. People use railways. People are there to serve people who use railways. And technology, of course, speaks for itself. Transport for London is now the single biggest user in the world of contactless debit card transactions. You don't need to buy a ticket. Why should you have to buy a ticket when you can just swipe your debit card over My Gate line and get access to the best value fare on the rail network? What have we been doing to try and maximise capacity? Well, we modernised the Northern Line, the Jubilee Line, the Victoria Line. The Victoria Line, as an example, is running now 34 trains an hour. This time next year, it'll be running 36 trains an hour. That's a hell of a lot of service. The Jubilee Line, I see my friends from Talos are in the front row. They're always in the front row looking for money. They re-signalled the Jubilee and the Northern Line and actually transformed the capacity on those lines with a state-of-the-art signalling system, which is just able to move so many more people per hour. We've also got to make our stations larger, because many of them are like rabbit warrens, not fit for purpose, not fit for the numbers of people using them now. Tottenham Court Road, it's not just a Crossrail station, it's also an LU station beside it, Vauxhall being enlarged hugely, Bond Street and Victoria too. Actually, the great news about Tottenham Court Road and Victoria, which Michelle has noted in her book somewhere, is that the stubs in the cross passageway for the connection to the Crossrail 2 station are already in place. So talk about passive provision. That's an example of forward thinking in practice. We're also boosting capacity beyond the Underground. 5-car trains on the Overground. The North London line, which we took over in 2008, has seen a 267% increase in passenger usage since we took it over. Some investment in infrastructure for sure, but a real focus on service performance from the model that we employ, double tracking on the DLR and also on the trams. And again, 191 new trains, air-conditioned trains on the Circle Line. I was delighted, the hottest July day ever last Wednesday, to see people with their fleeces on at Harrow on the Hill. Absolutely fantastic, real good investment of money. And then we do other stuff. It's a bit more dull, but it's really important. Lifts and mobility access, really important stuff actually. Major escalator works. Ballasted track renewal. We now replace full track form overnight during the week on the Underground. Pretty much the only railway in the world that does that, because we've got to free up the weekends more for passengers who want to use the services, and our people, of course, bring it all together. All of that allows us to free the night. Don't believe anything that you read in the RMT blogs. We will be running a night tube service, and we're able to do it because of the sustained investment that we've had on the tube network over time. And we should do, because actually the numbers of people using services after 10 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday night is rocketing. If you ever go clubbing late at night on a Saturday night and get the first Victoria Line train home on a Sunday morning, I can see many people in the audience probably do that, then you will see that it's packed. So there definitely is demand there for these services. London is growing hugely. That's why we've got to keep investing. London is just expanding. Michelle's talked about these figures. I won't repeat them. And this is not actually designed to be rude about Manchester, by the way, but it does just show that, fantastic as the work in Manchester is, and I have to give credit, because Manchester is really driving the Northern agenda in a way that no other city seems able to coalesce that level of strategic thinking. So really good stuff. But London is going to add the population, the current population of Manchester, to itself, to ourselves by 2030, which just shows the scale of the challenge ahead. So there's a picture of George. Everybody's talking about George today. I was delighted to say, just before the election, came down to Victoria Station late at night with Boris and committed to £10 billion of investment in London's infrastructure for transport over this Parliament. I'm sure he was absolutely confident of a Conservative majority government, and I'm sure he will stick with his pledge. We'll have the first clue after today and the further clue when we get into the spending review, which is later on this autumn, but it will be a challenge. We've got to keep doing it. There is a lot of investment. If you just put in this context, I mean, Crossrail is often talked about as a huge project, and it is, but actually the overall other investment in rail in London is bigger than Crossrail on an annual basis. So Crossrail, because it's one project, obviously gets all the attention, and it is really important, but there is more than that going on. Michelle touched on this for the future with Crossrail too, but I think it is really important that the viability and the effectiveness of the Northern powerhouse actually depends in transport investment in London, because it's only the scale of investment in London that will create the jobs, growth, skills, and all sorts of other things that will be required in Manchester and elsewhere and the north of England. And also, of course, it supports the jobs and growth across the whole country. 5,500 apprentices across the UK is no mean achievement in terms of what it delivers. What are we doing next? Well, we're going to buy 250 new air-cooled through carriage trains for the Central Line, the Piccadilly Line and the Bakerloo Line. That will transform the experience there. Sorry if it was a bit hot on the Central Line last week. Even hotter, I'm told, than the new bus for London, which is quite a feat. But these new air-cooled trains will be fantastic, and they will, again, add huge capacity, 60% capacity with new signalling to the Piccadilly Line. Just think of the growth opportunities and potential to build new houses and new business opportunities that creates. Vauxhall 9 Elms I've talked about in terms of the Northern Line. Crossrail in itself adds just 10% more capacity to the east-west routes, but you do need to go on and look at Crossrail too, as Michelle has so eloquently said. Let's not kid ourselves. Within a few months, we are going to start seeing mainline trains not stop in the morning peak going through Clapham Junction because the station is too busy. That, I think, is when Michelle and I will pounce on the government to make sure that the hybrid bill is enabled and that we are able to continue the investment, because that is a seriously big deal. You can't get on commuter trains going into Victoria or Waterloo in the morning peak in many cases, and that's not something that is sustainable in terms of London. We're expanding our reach on the Overground. We've just taken over some routes out to Enfield Town, Cheshunt and Chingford. We seem to have lost some of the names there, sorry about that. But that's part of our ambition to continue to modernise and invest in those. We've had a few teething problems with the trains, but we're buying 31 new trains. That will transform that. We've got a plan to fix them in the short term. And we are now operating with MTR, the franchise holder, the concession operator, Shenfield to Liverpool Street, which will become the first part of the Crossrail route when it opens. And again, that's focusing on delivering to the passengers. But we want to do more. And this is really the crux of what I want to say. Because actually, if you look at South London passengers, those passengers south of the river who use mainline services predominantly, 20% increase in capacity with a 50% increase in passenger journeys. So that again backs up the argument for Crossrail 2. But even more than that, we have to do something sooner. We have to deliver higher frequencies of services in South London. We have to tackle poor reliability, poor stations and poor off-peak service provision. This is not, I emphasise, an issue about the operators, the train operating companies, or indeed with Network Rail. It just, to my mind, is a product of a non-joined up approach to strategic planning for capacity improvements in South London, and something we need to get a grip of. So we can get these more reliable trains, shorter waiting times, increased capacity. We do need some new lines to connect some of the areas that aren't well served, and we certainly need, from an output perspective for passengers, a much more integrated approach along the lines, actually, again, that Manchester is leading the way on in terms of how you can do this without necessarily having direct control over everything.